everyone, it's Joe from GBE Reviews. So I'm going to do something a little untraditional today, and I'm going to talk about something not related to Japanese or anime at all. I want to talk about the third season of the Walking Dead game by Telltale. Now, I'm a huge fan of this series. This is what actually got me into visual novels and eventually anime. The fact that the story-driven narratives of these games are just something beyond what I've really ever experienced. They're just so strong and excellent that, it's one of the best games I've ever played. So now, I want to talk about Season 3, and this is not scripted. I don't have really anything but some broad ideas I want to say, because I think there's some really interesting things going on, and I think I've kind of figured out why Season 3 just doesn't really work. And what's really ironic to me is the reason Season 3 doesn't work is the only reason Seasons 1 and 2 did. And I think that the main driving force is Clementine. So if you go to Season 1, you play as protagonist Lee. And so Lee is a convict, kind of, found guilty of murder. His wife was having an affair. So he's on the way to the jail when the car he's in gets into a wreck, and then he's thrown into the middle of the zombie apocalypse. The first character he ends up meeting is Clementine. Clementine's a sweet young girl. Her parents are off on a trip, and she's stuck at home with the babysitter who's turned into a monster. So basically, she's hiding in her treehouse, and you save her, and you end up kind of playing, I want to say, like a guardian, father type role to her. Clem looks to you to kind of shape and guide her, and that's what makes Season 1 matter. Your choices are only important in how they impact Clementine. A lot of the other characters have interactions with Lee, but really it's like Clementine watching and noticing things you do. That's kind of the major driver of Season 1. So then enter Season 2, where you play as Clementine. I think this again works really well. Clementine is a character that you've shaped and molded through your interactions as Lee, and now you get to play as her. So she ends up meeting a new group of people, and there's a lot of ups and downs, but really what makes Season 2 kind of interesting is that she ends up seeing Kenny as she interacts with another group in her group. And so Kenny is somebody that was a major player in the first game. He was, like, in my playthrough at least, very good friends with Lee. Lee usually had his back. So what you end up with is you've got this new character that relates you back to Lee. It's something that links you back to the you of the first game. So you've got this cohesive narrative where Clementine is forced to kind of pick what she wants to do. Does she want to side with Kenny, or does she want to side with her new group? And that choice comes up over and over and over. And one thing I found was, even if I didn't completely agree with it, I was siding with Kenny over and over and over. Always, what would make Kenny happy? How do I do the right thing by Kenny? And I think a lot of that has to do with me personally empathizing with Kenny. He was a family man, very strong bonds. But you could see over time, Kenny definitely kind of went off the deep end. So you end up seeing Kenny just become ruthless and vicious, and as he loses more and more, just gets more and more like crazy and reckless and hazardous. And I found myself still siding with him either way, even when I was thinking, wow, I don't know, Kenny, I don't know about this, but you and I go way back, so I've got your back. But it was definitely that kind of weird feeling where, just because of nostalgia almost you side with Kenny. And so now, at the end of the game, there's one big choice, because you've got Kenny and this other character, Jane, who Clementine also kind of views as a bigger sister, and she's really nice. And so, you've got Kenny and Jane, and I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but basically you're forced to pick one of the two. And that's kind of like the person you go off with, and that's how you go into Game 3. So now, let me get to the problem with Game 3. I think the huge issue you're going to see is, as you're playing as this new character, Javier, you don't relate with him correctly. You can't get into his mindset in the way you could get into Clementine and Lee's mindset. Lee was kind of a blank slate. He's the first guy you saw. Clementine you had associated with so much, you kind of felt natural being her. Now with Javi, the problem is that he's a brand new character. For the first bit of it, before Clementine comes in, you can kind of play him accurately. So you've got him and this woman Kate and his brother and his niece and nephew. So they've got a pretty cohesive family unit. And yeah, there's issues and they don't all get along with each other, but generally you understand where Javi's at. The problem is you introduce Clementine, and I think that just breaks the game. I think Clementine just doesn't work in this game as a character because she makes you, as Javi, act in a completely irrational way. Okay, so let me give you a few examples. Here we see a scene in which bandits have just attacked you and your family, and your sister-in-law Kate is fairly seriously hurt. You have two choices. 1, retreat with your family and make sure they're protected and safe, or 2, leave them in the care of a guy you just met less than a day ago and stand and fight with Clementine. Clearly the obvious choice is to go with your family, and yet I chose to stay and fight with Clementine. And if the end of the chapter results are any indication, likely you did too. A prime example of a choice that didn't make any sense at all, but we made it anyway because we loved Clementine. Alright, so here's another example. Clementine's gotten into a fight with a guy who stiffed her on some bullets, and to prove the point was firing her gun at him to show it didn't work. One of the times it actually did work, and she pretty much shot his face off. You're asked if you should either A, tell them it was an accident, which is basically the correct answer, or B, tell them he had it coming and you felt threatened, which, to be fair, you did get slightly cut, but at the time when he was shot, you had the situation well under control. And again, most of us lied and covered for a girl we met roughly 2 hours ago and didn't know at all. And she had just basically murdered a guy in cold blood who may or may not have deserved it, but still, that's not really the character that we remember Clementine to be. So, just think about that for a minute. Twice now, in just the first episode, we've covered for Clementine in a way that we would not do unless she were Clementine. If you had the exact same character who made all the same choices but was not Clementine, I don't think I would have covered for her either time. So it's clearly a bias that's being added to the game just because Clementine's Clementine. Any decision you see about Clementine, do you trust Clementine? Do you go with Clementine? Do you help Clementine? Anything related to her are like skewed 85, 90, 95% of people choose to side with Clementine. And the thing that doesn't make sense is Javi doesn't really know her, but you as the player know her. So you have this immediate bond with her. Basically, you are Clementine. You shaped her in the second season. And kind of just like how Kenny's different in the second season versus the first, Clementine's different as well. From when you last left her, she's gone through a lot of different things and she's seen a lot of different things. And how she's interacted has definitely molded her into a very different person. But you still see that sweet, innocent Clementine that you played as in the first and second game. So that kind of breaks the narrative and skews things in a really weird and unintuitive way. I found myself over and over siding with Clementine when Javi would not side with her. He would side with his brother and his sister and his family. But he'd side with Clementine because you want to side with you, and you are Clementine. So I feel like that overall approach just made the game not balanced anymore. I didn't feel like I had a lot of choice. It was very clear that, help Clementine. Clementine is somebody that's really important that I really like. And that overall approach to the game, I think just generally broke it. So I'm not saying it's bad, and there are a lot of things about it that were really good. In fact, the graphics are better. I think the quick time events, swiping keys instead of using your mouse made the game flow a lot better. The dialogue is good and the characters are compelling, but you just don't get to see enough of that because you don't really side with people other than Clementine. And at first I thought maybe that was just me. But when you see the results of those choices, 85, 90, 95% of people, you see that everybody's siding with Clementine. So Telltale just didn't really think through what adding Clementine as a character to another completely unknown character would do to the story and the balance. Also, a fun fact not many people know is that Telltale originally intended to make Lee into Clementine's older brother, but scrapped the idea because they didn't think having a set of characters with a shared backstory would work well to someone entering the world. I personally completely agree, and found that developing a new relationship from scratch is what made the first game most interesting. I think they made the right choice given how I felt playing as Javi. My overall opinion is that Clementine just didn't work in this game because her pre-existing relationship with the player made you act in an unnatural way during any sort of interaction with her. Though Clementine did add a level of nostalgia and interconnectivity to the game, she made it feel emotionally manipulative. I couldn't help but see that fragile young girl. Therefore, it felt like Telltale was kind of forcing my hand, even more so than it did during Season 2 by adding in Kenny. The worst part is that Javi's actually a pretty interesting character in his own right, and were you to take Clementine out and replace her with a character that acted just like her and made similar decisions, but didn't tug at our heartstrings as much, Season 3 would have been almost as good as Season 1. Okay, I think that wraps up everything I wanted to say. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Did you enjoy Season 3? And do you agree that Clementine's inclusion made us act in a way that was counterintuitive? As always, this is Joe from GBE Review saying to you, Jeanne.